6,000 subscribers. Thank you so much, everyone. I wasn't quite sure what to do this time, and then just before making this video, I got a couple really good ideas. And I decided that it was about time I do this one, since it's something you've all been asking me to do for a while now. Not just a What's the Best on Soundwave, which you all really want to see, but bringing back What's the Best in general. I never intended to stop doing What's the Best, I just got busy doing other stuff and kept forgetting. And this one specifically has been basically asked for since the start of my channel, so I thought it was finally time to do it. It's taken me so long because, quite frankly, I actually kind of collect Soundwaves at a much slower rate than other characters. I love Soundwave, but it's taken me till just now to finally feel like I have enough to do this. And if you've seen my videos before, you probably think that you know how this one's gonna go. And, yes, exactly, you 100% know how this is going to go, but you know what they say. Life is a destination, not a journey. Wait, so welcome to What's the Best? What's the best Soundwave that I own? Now I need to just decide what order I'm going to tackle this in. Do I go smallest to largest, cheapest to most expensive? I think I'm just going to go in acquisition order. Masterpiece Soundwave. My first figure of Soundwave ever, if you don't count this one. The figure that were I not to have gotten, you would not be watching this right now. This channel would not exist. This is the figure that rekindled my passion for Transformers collecting. Were my brother not to have gotten me this for my birthday several years ago, I probably wouldn't ever have picked anything from Siege up, let alone felt passionate enough to complain that Earthrise wasn't living up to the directly preceding line. I would not have gotten back into the fandom at Titan's Return and experienced some of the coolest molds to come out in the last 10 years. I also would not have had to sit through the Prime Wars trilogy and Netflix War for Cybertron shows, so at least it's not all bad if I didn't get back in. But I wouldn't have this amazing community right now, and I wouldn't have found my purpose in making videos either. So I owe this figure a ton, and you might think I'm biased in this figure's favor because of all that, but you'd be wrong, since it doesn't matter how much I like this figure, it can't play a factor in how I grade this, since this is one of the most flawless, if not the most flawless figures of all time. I can't have a bias towards it affect its ranking because it's already scoring 100% on everything. Okay, that's a tiny exaggeration, there are some things this could be doing better, minor ones, but they do exist. This really needed bigger biceps, these are a bit spindly for the character, and there's nothing really preventing them from making this boy more swole other than they just didn't. Like, the space basically already exists to beef these up like 20%, and if it doesn't, they could carve out some with little effort. The hands are also very basic and could stand a little modernization. The feet look wrong if we are strictly sticking to accuracy, but this personally doesn't bother me. Though, I do have to knock off like a % on the accuracy score. And this could have more posability by today's standards, though it was probably the most articulated figure ever at the time it was released, and it held that record for many years. Really, all you need to do to get this thing up to the modern era is add an ab crunch, deeper knees, and some toe tilt up. People like to claim this doesn't have any backwards movement on the legs, but all you have to do is rotate this thigh piece backwards, and you're in business. Another negative quality of this is the door on the chest is known for breaking off. A tragedy every time it happens, but if you have to glue this back on and it never moves again, it's still an amazing figure. And don't even think of using his double tape gimmick with this. It doesn't work even when there aren't any tapes in it to begin with, it always just gets stuck. Lastly, whatever mode you leave this in, you need it resting on something soft, because the vibrations of moving past this will scuff the bottoms of the feet in robot mode and the thighs in alt mode. But outside those minor issues, this is getting near perfect marks in accuracy, it looks basically screen perfect, just general cool factor, it looks awesome, posability is still great despite it being so old, transformation is one of the best of all time, so fun, so fast, so satisfying. If you have the Kingdom Core class, it's just that transformation, but even better. The gimmicks it has rule, and the alt mode is so close to perfect it might as well be perfect. Maybe you don't like tape players in this day and age, they are antiquated and all that, but there is no denying that this version of Soundwave is supposed to be this, and it nailed it. Now from that amazing figure, we get an in comparison much worse one. Though that's not fair, anything looks bad next to the MP. If I'm not comparing the two, the Siege Soundwave is quite nice. His accuracy is obviously going to suffer a little bit due to the cyber stylization they gave him, but that is also helping with the coolness factor on him, so it's a give and take. What I'm seeing here is accurate enough to not really worry about unless you are intentionally splitting hairs to find the best Soundwave like I'm trying to here. The paint is great, the surface detailing is masterfully done, I'm one of the crazy few who actually likes the battle damage, so that's not a detractor for me, and the posability rocks. He's obviously not as posable as the Masterpiece, but he's more posable than 95% of the entire War for Cybertron, really only missing deeper knee bends, butterfly joints at the shoulders, and toe action. Plus, he actually has an ab crunch, and a deep one at that. Transformation on this is really pretty fun and satisfying, though sadly, most of the process exists simply to exist, and not because it needed to happen. Really, they just engineered stuff to make it more complex for the sake of complexity, but you can achieve 90% of this alt mode looking like it's supposed to with half the steps. And the alt mode of this thing is really the weak link of the figure, committing the classic space Soundwave sin it seems, and not being much of anything. It's kind of a space barge-ish, Star Wars Landspeeder-ish underside kibble monster. Really, there are several better alternate transformations you can do for this, but honestly the best thing you can do with this, and I have to thank subscriber SharkZ for figuring this out and sending me pics, is to parts form the arms off and then just kind of fake a tape cassette player out of him. It pretty much ruins the transformation, but this is a better alt mode, and you don't have to buy an upgrade kit or an incredibly hard to locate store exclusive to get some version of this iconic mode. Speaking of that hard to find and largely overpriced exclusive, this is really the same figure, but worse in most ways. If you like the clean look and want less surface sculpting, this will do you better, but there is serious incongruity with it here because they didn't resculpt his arms. So those are still very messy where everything else is clean. And his chest is a tiny amount wider in both directions, but that tiny amount results in it becoming awkward looking, especially from behind. He's got mostly the same posing as the other figure, but he loses the ab crunch in favor of a backwards butterfly, so it's mostly a lateral trade. But every tolerance on this figure is weird when compared to its original counterpart. Most joints are too tight, but some are way too loose, and all that results in a robot mode that doesn't really know what it wants to be. The transformation on this is way worse, though if you are doing Shark Z's custom mode, they're probably more the same. But if you aren't, this just isn't a satisfying process, and it doesn't work smoothly at all. It honestly feels cheaper than the original, plus it faux forms for basically no reason. And the tape player mode is deeply flawed. Yes, the Siege version of this is even more so, but that's a fan mode, and it's supposed to be Cybertronian. This is just kibbly in all the wrong ways, too flat, and unfinished looking. If this is your only option for a tape player Soundwave, I hope this satisfies you, but it is a compromised experience. Then we drop down to the Kingdom Core class Soundwave, and wherever the Earthrise or Netflix or whatever you want to call it Soundwave fails, this succeeds. This looks more accurate, the sculpt is consistent, the proportions are better, the transformation is fantastic, and the alt mode, while not perfect, is more cohesive. It's not great on that front, but it is better. The only place this is really losing to the ER version is in the posability, and technically on accessories, but I don't take those into account on what's the best unless I really need a tiebreaker, and this is in no way a tie. Yes, it's smaller to a comical point, but I do think you will find this a lot more satisfying than the Earthrise. And most people seem to agree. And then I have this contentious figure. A lot of you really feel that I'm too harsh on this thing, and to that I'd have to say, good. I'd rather be the one person that says this isn't good enough, even if I'm being overly critical, than the 101st person to tell you to go get it. Because for some reason, most reviewers in this fandom seem to be afraid to be negative. I want to be clear, I am not trying to cast aspersions on those other reviewers. I'm just saying that for the most part, while I am never trying to be negative about the stuff I'm reviewing, I'm also not going to ever try to be positive either. Maybe I do have a harsher viewpoint than my audience or most people, but at the end of the day, if I'm the only person decrying something as bad, I'm okay with that. And I hope you at least enjoy the video even if it doesn't line up with how you feel about a thing. And to those who thank me for being, as they describe me, the only objective reviewer, I cannot lay claim to that title. I try to be as objective as possible, but that doesn't mean other people don't, and it doesn't mean that I don't let my opinions sometimes taint my assessment. And objectivity does not mean inherently better. Objectivity does not matter to your opinions. What you like or don't will always be subjective, regardless of any other factor, including objective quality. And there is nothing wrong with that. You like what you like. And grading this by the criteria I use gives it a terrible score. As far as I'm concerned, if the transformation sucks and the alt mode sucks, then 2/3 of the figure are failing the whole point of being a transformer. And while yes, the robot mode here looks good, and the articulation is a tad above average, the transformation is one of the worst of the last 3 years, and the alt mode is nothing. This is not the concept art. The concept art clearly had him be some form of hovercar, and the arms were clearly trading place with the legs. This is just Soundwave in a yoga pose and barely holding together. So as far as I'm concerned, 77% of this figure is a failure and gets an F. You may disagree with that, but I hope you can see based on how I rank things why we differ, and that I'm not crazy for this. And that will be the last Soundwave I had. Until just a few days ago when I picked up another Mechanical Alliance figure. And you may be surprised to hear that considering the last Mechanical Alliance figure I picked up was the worst of the year, and that I'm not really picking up new figures right now because of my financial situation. But I got this for free. Normally this figure is like $120, but the clean paint version is only $60. And I hated the dirty paint job on the Blitzwing already. It was one of the worst things about that figure, so I'm happy to not deal with that for half off. And then I just had $60 of store credit lying around, so I grabbed this for nothing. And this is so much better it's not even funny. The look is off, because the legs are about twice as long as the torso, and they probably could have been made shorter and only improved the figure since they don't need to be this long for the transformation. And the feet are a little oversized, plus he has creepy, long-fingered monkey hands. But otherwise, what you are getting is an immensely accurate rendition of this version of this character. Posability is absolutely through the roof when compared to the Hasbro version, with deeper joints on every limb, fully articulated hands with palm action, and an ab crunch. Though his toe tilt is way too loose, and despite the fact that this is supposed to be the low-effort paint job version, there is still a ton of paint here. Plus, he comes with a great light-up feature in the head, as well as his gun, both of which had batteries installed at the factory. Though I don't normally talk about accessories, I just have to with this. He's got a Ravage, which I have no idea how to get to fit into his chest, and perhaps the most ridiculous blast effect of all time. I'm grateful that they were really trying to give me my money's worth, but this thing is so weird and goofy and probably should have been about half the size it is. This looks terrible. Anyways, the transformation on this is better, though not good, and the alt mode is actually anything at all. it's some kind of crawler. Whereas the Studio Series was nothing, this is at least trying. That thing gave up before it ever started. This thing tried even 1%, and man, I have said percent a lot in this video, but this had steps, parts that came out, the head went away, and it doesn't just look like the robot trying to emulate the shape of a pretzel. It's not great, it's not even good. They definitely could have done better, but I'm not insulted by this because I don't feel like this company felt entitled to my money just for having showed up. So, what's the best? Surprising no one at all, Studio Series Soundwave is obviously the worst. It's probably the second worst posing figure of the bunch, it has the worst transformation and the worst alt mode, it is not accurate to the classic interpretation of the character, but it is accurate to the interpretation of the character it is trying to be, which is a slightly lesser point since the whole goal of this show is trying to find the definitive version of the character, but I can't write off other designs entirely for not being the classic version. Next up is a hard one. Posability on the Siege and Earthrise are about identical, with the MA being a bit better. He's got more range in the knees, less in the elbows, way more in the hands, worse butterfly joints than the ER, but an ab crunch like the Siege. The Earthrise would take accuracy to the classic interpretation of the character, but his width makes that a flimsy point in his favor, with the Siege looking generally better despite being less accurate, and the MA looking much more like the interpretation of the character it's trying to be than either of the other two. The Siege does not count as being accurate to the War for Cybertron Netflix show, because the show is duplicating the design, not the other way around. So honestly, the Mechanical Alliance comes out in front there, and the Earthrise barely edges out the Siege. Transformation is best on the Siege, with the Earthrise pulling up a distant second, and the Mechanical Alliance being an even more distant third, with the alt mode on the MA being the worst, and the Siege being bad and inaccurate in the main mode, but only not good and somewhat inaccurate in the Shark Z version, and the Earthrise being the winner on this front. So I'm going to have to go with the Mechanical Alliance being next. That doesn't mean it's bad, or even necessarily worse than its competition on a value level. This is only twice the price of the Studio Series figure, but easily 2.5 times the size and 4 times the quality with way more accessories. The only reason to pick that up over this is if you really need it to be in scale with other figures. Then this next one would be a lot easier if the Earthrise weren't so overly wide. Siege looks better, transforms better, has a decent alt mode, fails on the accuracy front, slightly on the robot, and badly on the alt mode, unless you use the fan mode, at which point the transformation goes down, but the alt mode comes up. Earthrise's only advantage is in accuracy, which it's not nailing, especially because of the arms. I almost put the Earthrise over the Siege, but with the options you have with the Siege, plus the fact that it's generally winning all the other categories, I'll give it to the Siege, but either way, this feels dirty. Next up, it's obviously going to be the Kingdom. Of all the entries so far, it's the most accurate to the classic interpretation, it looks competitively good in general, posability is down, but transformation is by far the best of any of the figures before it in these rankings. And the alt mode is accurate. Not perfect, but easily as accurate as the most accurate alt mode, which was the ER up to this point, which wasn't as accurate as it needed to be. So yeah, the teeny tiny Legends figure is second best. And obviously the best is the Masterpiece Soundwave. What can I say? This is one of the most perfect, best figures of all time. On every level, it is a showstopper. It looks the best, feels the best, poses the best, transforms the best, it is the highest quality, it is the most accurate in both modes, has the most accessories, which doesn't factor in. Nothing is compromised. This is a blast and a half. A figure so good, I'd basically describe my entire collection as me chasing the dragon of the satisfaction this figure gave me. Plastic crack, indeed. A crown jewel of any collection it's in. I don't care how good the Not Fans Toys version is, it physically cannot be better than this. Masterpiece Soundwave is the best Transformers figure ever. And I don't know if that is hyperbole or exaggeration, but I can't think of a better figure. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know you know what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.